Joining us now is Gregory Yates. He's a Los Angeles civil rights attorney who has successfully represented victims of LAPD civil rights abuses. On the phone with us is Robert Ernenwine. He is the former LA Deputy District Attorney. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Hi, Linda.
Gregory, I'm going to start with you. You've been able to look at this videotape. What's your assessment?
It's just very, very heart-wrenching to see that once again Los Angeles is faced with a situation where the public is going to question the integrity of our police system in Los Angeles. It's history repeating itself once again.
Robert, let me just bring you in because you come into this from a slightly different perspective. I mean, what we see is clearly disturbing, but do you think that there are some mitigating circumstances we should know about?
Well, let's remember the context of what happened here. We have the suspect engaged in the 30-minute car chase, risking the lives of innocents. He's driving a stolen car. He ultimately, evidently, stops the car. He flees. He does not answer to officers' direction. And then ultimately he is taken to the ground by several officers after being involved in felony conduct. What we can't see on this videotape is we can't see what the individual's hands are doing, whether or not he's resisting, whether or not he's complying with officers' direction. So before we make conclusions as to exactly what occurred and whether or not there was excessive force, I think there has to be a complete investigation, and the officers need to be interviewed, and the full context of what happened needs to be discovered.
Gregory, do you know whether this man, the suspect, was armed at the time?
No, I don't.
Do you know whether he was high on any sort of drugs?
I don't, and I don't think it's pertinent to the situation. You can see from the tape that an officer had tried to put one of his hands around to his back and was in a position to cuff him when he was interrupted by another officer who pounced on Mr. Miller and interrupted that process. And then along comes Hatfield, kicks him in the head after he's subdued and has surrendered, and starts to pummel him with approximately 11 flashlight beatings. It's inexcusable. You know, it really doesn't matter what happened prior to that under the circumstances.
Well, Robert, you have to admit, I mean, the footage is, I may disagree with Gregory in terms of what other things that may be significant, whether or not this guy's armed, whether or not he was high on some sort of drugs. But, you know, it's really hard to dispute that he was prone and his hands were out in front of him. He was, at this point, seemingly defenseless.
Well, if you'll see from the videotape, you do see at one point his hands out in front of him. But when the officers when Officer Hatfield actually arrives in the scene, you cannot see from the videotape exactly what the suspect's hands are doing at that point. Look, my point is this. Let's be balanced. Let's be fair. I think the mayor and the chief of police making highly derogatory, negative comments about the officers this early on in the process. These gentlemen are out there trying to protect the public. They have just taken into custody a fleeing felon who's been on a 30-minute car chase, endangering all of the other citizens of Los Angeles, driving a stolen car. We see the back of the officer. We cannot see exactly what the suspect is doing at the time that the blows are provided. Let's wait and see what the investigation discloses. Let's not throw everybody into the same pot here and just make across-the-board accusations regarding all of the officers that were involved here. I think we should wait. When a criminal suspect is charged with a crime, particularly if they have notoriety or celebrity, we talk about not engaging in a rush to judgment. Right. Well, I think the same should apply for police officers.
Gregory, are you rushing to judgment?
No, I don't think so, but I respect what Robert said, and I agree with him in essence. The problem is, you know, we're not rushing to judgment. You know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It's on its face, unjustified use of force. While I agree that you know, Mayor Hahn and Chief Bratton shouldn't rush to judgment, I think their statements were appropriate given the context of our situation in Los Angeles with the King riots and with the Rampart corruption scandal, being under a federal consent decree and coming down to completing that, and then to have this happen. It's just really unfortunate. So I think we have to call it as we see it here. And certainly we have to go through the process, but you know, I think it speaks for itself.
Robert, I have to mention something that just seems sort of obvious. These officers know that every time there's a car chase in Los Angeles, every TV news crew you know, in creation, is right there with choppers and TV cameras, and you could even see from the searchlight that was coming from the chopper, they had to know they were on camera as this thing was happening, right?
That's right, and that may very well be something that the officers bring up at their administrative hearings, or if there is a trial in this matter at their trials, that they knew that there was public scrutiny. They know that these chases are televised, and they were fully aware that they were subject to public scrutiny, and they exercised reasonable force. Let me also say this: we're looking at the videotape now of this chase. These chases are terrible circumstances. Innocent people can be killed. The adrenaline that is surging through these officers' bodies as these things are going on. These are gentlemen and ladies in the city that have families of their own. They have wives and children, husbands and children to go home to. They're involved in a 30-minute chase where their lives are endangered. And then subsequently the suspect runs. And then subsequently they take the subject into custody. Place them in the human context of what is occurring. They want to bring this person into compliance, into custody. They want to get this person cuffed and disabled. Any resistance, any perceived failure to cooperate is going to be met with force at that time. Whether or not it was excessive under these circumstances, just for a moment, let's assume that perhaps it was excessive. Place yourself in the position of these officers and what they've been through for the 30 minutes immediately preceding this circumstance. And I think that we have to be fair about it.
Well, as we had mentioned before, this incident is under investigation. The police officers involved, 8 of them, have been taken off street duty. They're basically on desk duty while this investigation is underway. Robert Ernenwine, former deputy DA in L.A., and Gregory Yates, civil rights attorney. Thanks to you both.